Aloha and welcome, Inspired Moneymakers. Thanks for joining me today. If it's your first time here, welcome. And if you're a returning viewer or listener, welcome back. It's always great to have you with us. This episode is investing in the metaverse, exploring the future of digital assets and virtual economies. What exactly is the metaverse and why does it resonate with us on such a deep emotional level? I'm really looking forward to this conversation because in some senses, it's like metaverse, I don't see it in the headlines as often. Everything's all about AI and Gen AI, and I'm reading about AI agents coming. But I think what many people don't realize is that really it's like one and the same. The I guess overlap and interconnections are much more than we might realize. And I suspect we're going to get into that today. For many of us, our experiences with virtual reality and augmented reality may have been a fleeting experience or surface level. Yet these technologies really do hold the potential to transform how we live, how we work, how we connect. So in this episode, I want to dive into what the metaverse truly is, why it matters, and how we can identify opportunities, whether it's for integrating it into our daily lives or uncovering smart investment opportunities. Notably, and I did see in the headlines that Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of the company formerly known as Facebook, today called Meta, he's poured billions into his metaverse vision, a virtual world that he describes as the next evolution of the internet. It's really a bold and long-term bet that has not always been well received on Wall Street, but it underscores the metaverse's transformative potential. So what does the metaverse mean for us? How can we prepare for its impact? These are some of the questions that I want to explore with our panel of experts as we uncover the exciting and sometimes daunting possibilities ahead. Before we jump in, this episode is brought to you by my financial advisory firm, Runnymede Capital Management. I want to invite you to take advantage of a 3-minute financial plan. Head over to inspiredmoney.fm/getplan. It just takes 3 minutes, and it'll give you a personalized snapshot to help kickstart your financial journey. Jump on the opportunity, and then we can have a conversation afterwards. Now, let's welcome in our panelists for today. I'm very excited. We have Nonny de la Peña, often called the Godmother of virtual reality. She's a trailblazer in immersive storytelling and the founder of Emblematic Group, recognized as Wired Magazine's Make Tech Human Agent of Change and named Wall Street Journal's Technology Innovator of the Year. She pioneered the field of immersive journalism, using cutting-edge AR and VR technologies to foster empathy and engagement through powerful narratives. Nonny, welcome. So glad you could make it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to jumping into this topic. We have Sarbjeet Johal, who is a renowned cloud consultant and technology strategist with over 2 decades of experience in enterprise IT, cloud computing, and digital transformation, having led cloud initiatives at companies like Rackspace, Oracle, VMware, and EMC. He's served over 100 clients globally, specializing in cloud architecture, data center optimization, and IT strategy. Sarbjeet has been interviewed as a guest on this podcast before, so it's really great to have Sarbjeet back.
I'm glad to be here.
Sarbjeet, I understand that you have to duck out, I think at the half hour. So we're going to keep things moving and take advantage of the time that we have with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Rounding out the panel today, we have McDonald, who is a seasoned technology entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience and a track record of managing billion-dollar portfolios. He's co-founder and CEO of Futureverse. He's at the forefront of innovation in the metaverse and AI, driving transformative digital experiences through ventures like Readyverse Studios and Altered State Machine. Aaron, you're in New Zealand. I'm glad that you could make it on a different day than the rest of us.
I'm in the future.
Exactly.
It's good over here. It's and this future is good.
Yeah, tell me how the stock market does so that I can take advantage. So you're doing things with Readyverse Studios. Just wanted to mention to the Inspired Money viewers and listeners that episode 36, so it goes way back to the beginning of this podcast, I interviewed Ready Player One screenwriter Zach Penn, and he talked about what it was like working with Steven Spielberg on Ready Player One. What are you doing with Readyverse Studios?
Yeah, so we're actually working with Ernie Klein, who wrote Ready Player One, and Dan Farrar, who produced the movie, and alongside Warner Brothers, to take the ideas from the books and the things that people fell in love with in the movie and turn those into real technology that can help create what we kind of view as the connective tissue for what could be this next level, this next version of the internet. So how can we make lots of the things that folks are building more interoperable, and so that it can seem like that seamless journey going between immersive experiences, just like it is for browsing the web at the moment with a browser.
I look forward to seeing how it will move from, printed page to the big screen to an interactive experience. So that's really cool.
It's a really fun project. We get to thanks to Ernie and Dan and Stephen for making a 2.5-hour documentary on what the metaverse is, because it kind of really set the scene for people's kind of mainstream and pop culture understanding of what this could be. And so it's been fun to work alongside them and get to interact with the IP and bring those characters and things to life in playable experiences.
Well, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think the key word that you used, Aaron, was the interoperability.
100%.
This has been something we've been working on for some time now. Is both that concept of ownership, where you can take your own content and sort of your digital self and digital belongings and digital personality across different spaces. I think that's a really important question that we've barely begun to address. And then again, what does that mean in terms of how we're going to view them? Are we going to be limited in the way that we can experience it? Are we going to, I remember the day when head of communications department at USC, Dean, going, nobody's going to watch movies on a tiny little iPhone screen. I think you might want to just wait and take a look at that. So the same thing. How are you going to explore your metaverse? Are we going to have it sometimes be just through your phone, through through your computer, through your glasses? I mean, I think it's going to be all of the above.
I totally agree with that, and it's really heartening to hear that you mention that word interoperability, because I think that's the key distinction between what we have had in gaming and what the metaverse can be. And where that kind of metaverse hype cycle came in, people kind of immediately imagined themselves in virtual environments. And I think it was intuitive that the internet could become a more immersive space, but the only real examples of that we had were games. And so people immediately jumped into that being the thing. And I think the idea of the metaverse is much broader than just a game that you can be inside, but it is this kind of increasingly more immersive version of the internet, and not even necessarily explicitly in AR and VR, but just in the way that applications and customer experiences come together. And an example that I use often is this process started decades ago now. It's kind of funny to say that because it doesn't seem like that long, but when I was in my early career in telecommunications and IT, we had, the internet and technology was very siloed. You had communications companies, you had, commerce companies, you had banking companies, you had finance companies, you had media companies, and they're all very distinct. In fact, media companies had their own telecommunications network. That's how far apart they were from everything else. And then we saw this immersive convergence start to really happen with social media, where advertising, media, and communications got smashed into one customer experience that was a more immersive experience that you were part of more and a participant in more than you ever had been before. And that trend continues and continues on. Social commerce is another layer of more immersive, metaversal consumer experience where we've smashed commerce into that same thing. And so to jump into like video gaming as being the metaverse, I think is kind of a mistake, because it really is just this trajectory the internet is going on of consumer experiences compressing and compressing and compressing and becoming more connected to our everyday lives, and us being more a bigger participant in those things.
That's the perfect setup for going into segment one. And I'm excited because everyone can hear and see that this panel is ready to go. Unfortunately, Charlie Fink, who was scheduled to join us today, cannot make it, but we have the three panelists. So let's jump right into segment one and get started. The Metaverse is an immersive, shared digital space that integrates virtual reality, augmented reality, blockchain, and decentralized frameworks. Unlike traditional online experiences, the Metaverse enables interactive 3D environments for socializing, gaming, learning, and more, creating a next-generation internet deeply integrated into daily life. Key technologies include VR, which fully immerses users in virtual settings through headsets, and AR, which overlays digital information onto real-world views using smartphones or AR glasses. Blockchain supports decentralized asset ownership, allowing users to buy and trade items like NFTs and participate in virtual economies. Cryptocurrencies power transactions, while spatial computing merges digital and physical spaces, enhancing interactive experiences. Interoperability and decentralization are essential, ensuring continuity of assets and identities across platforms. Current metaverse-like platforms, such as Roblox and Decentraland, serve as early examples, combining social gaming, virtual economies, and user-generated content. Predictions for 2030 suggest massive growth, with the metaverse transforming work, commerce, and social interaction in an open digital ecosystem. Nonny, maybe you can get us started. Like, how do you define the metaverse? And I imagine you combining journalism with virtual reality. Many people at the outset must have thought you were crazy. But what have your findings been in?
Yeah,
like,
worse.
How does it touch us?
Worse than crazy, I promise you. Worse than crazy. But the idea is that our physical world has spatial dimensions to it. So the idea that we're actually looking at our journalism, our news, our information in a way that's flat and not intuitive really is contrary to what we should be demanding, right? We should be able to experience story, the news, in the same way that we experience the real world with dimension. Now, things are moving very, very quickly in terms of the way that we can capture the physical world. So this becomes a really interesting part. I think everybody thinks of the metaverse as kind of this sort of magical extension of a gaming kind of world, but actually we've just done a really breakthrough 4D Gaussian splatting system. Essentially, it's using video to make three-dimensional content, but also moving with video. That was 10,000 finished minute when I was working last year in this field, and now I'm doing it I'm creating an open source system that can be shared. So this idea that the metaverse is kind of a cute, fun place to play, that's going to be there too. I'm not denying that, but there's going to be so many bigger use cases that directly reflect and potentially change our physical world environment. And I think that's really important to keep in mind as we start to think about what does it really mean to have a metaverse.
Sarbjeet, what are your thoughts?
I think metaverse is the progression of internet and the sort of optical enablement we have done through the internet, the it's the computer vision married with our own vision as humans, and it's a mashup of that. And to enable that, we needed the foundational sort of technologies like better networks, better computing, and we are getting there. Seems like we kind of put the metaverse in front of the prerequisites a little too early. Facebook started talking a little too early about metaverse, but metaverse is the ultimate goal, if you will, like where the digitalization will take us there. It's not only meant for, I believe, for gaming and or entertainment or sports kind of use cases, but also for B2B use cases, very productive use cases, like people operating cranes, machines in the mines and in dangerous places, and robots fixing very heavy duty bigger robots. For example, in Tesla factory here, like 3 miles from here where I live, they use robots to fix the bigger robots which build the cars, right? Small robots are working inside the factory, and people are operating it from miles or hundreds of miles or thousands of miles away. So that's where we need to go. We are making progress, and miniaturization of hardware is happening, which we need to do. We need to get there, and at the same time, miniaturization of software is also happening through microservices. And now with Gen AI, we are we're talking about agentic frameworks, which will enable the physical sort of robots to do the things we as humans do. So yeah, it's all mesh up of multifaceted, technologies coming to the digital future. That's how I see it. There's a huge opportunity, but the timeline will be longer than most people expect, I think. But people who invest in it early, I think they will do really good or great, I would say.
Aaron, how do you define the metaverse? And what role do you see AI playing in its evolution?
Yeah. So I think my view is we're already in it. Like the notion that the digital world and the digital society and the digital economy are separated from the physical thing is kind of, in my view, a silly notion. Like the average human already will spend more than 44 years looking at a screen. It's over half of life expectation, and so this idea that you can extract somehow the digital out of society or the digital out of economy and it's this separated thing is untrue. If you took either of those things out, the world would collapse as we know it. And so we're in the metaverse and we're on this journey to what the others have described as a more immersive, more connected version of it. But that is happening every day. I think we touched on earlier, the before we got on here, this kind of notion of the hype cycle of the metaverse versus the hype cycle of AI, and those being distinct things. And as I mentioned, I did a keynote at the Morgan Stanley China Summit where my headline slide was "The Metaverse is dead, long live AI," and in that tried to paint a picture for people that these are really two parts of the same thing. You
Thank
can't.
you. And sorry, I just have to interrupt you because I've been on the World Economic Forum's Metaverse Council, and we're just issuing, kind of a blog, whatever, and the whole thing is, metaverse is dead, long live the metaverse, because basically you're absolutely right. It's going to be part of every piece of our lives.
Yeah.
And it affects, everything from NASA scientists up in, the astronauts up in space who are stuck up there right now. They can only meet their loved ones in the metaverse, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We can talk about digital twinning of cities. Like if we're going to start doing any kind of planning and how we actually have physical. I mean, I could go through every aspect of anybody's life and say, this is how you're going to be engaged with it on the metaverse, in the metaverse.
No, totally. And I talk about, if you take it, NVIDIA as the kind of superstar of AI, NVIDIA is a metaverse company. They're a company that makes hardware to render virtual worlds. They're a company that makes hardware and software to train agents that live in virtual worlds. It's a company that makes hardware that powers AIs that generate immersive content in 3D and democratizes the content creation layer of the metaverse. And so the notion that AI is this separated thing, and that you can have all of these tools that enable us to democratize the creation of immersive content, and that content doesn't live in the metaverse, is a silly notion. And so they really are two sides of the same coin. And the agentic web, which is kind of this hot topic and narrative, I think, for 2025, is the metaverse. It's agents acting on our behalf in virtual space and time, and there couldn't be anything more metaversal than that. And so they are the two sides of the same thing, in my view.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I see metaverse is not a Boolean construct. Sometimes we think, oh, we are already here or not. Is it like one milestone? It's not. It's a spectrum, right? We already in the metaverse, where it's in the preliminary stages of metaverse versus like very mature stage, and it's a big spectrum. And we're getting there, and we both said it perfectly right. Yeah.
I want to ask Nonny about the interoperability, because I've been reading analyst reports talking about Meta and Zuckerberg. One of the reasons why he's doubling down on the metaverse is because he wants to control it. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess the thing I can say to you is that people used to, the comment always was, what's the best camera to have? The one in your pocket. So that was your phone, right? And you controlled your phone and the images, et cetera, et cetera. And we created JPEGs, right? Or PDFs, or even when Microsoft, made Microsoft Word worked on a Mac. I mean, we tried to make these systems grow in a way that allowed you to participate in moving your images yourself across places. And that's what made a successful internet. To think that we should have only one virtual world that everybody comes into, I think it's bound to fail. Does that mean that, Facebook isn't still going strong? It is. It's surprisingly strong, and Instagram's surprisingly strong. So I don't think he's going to control the whole metaverse, but I do think he's going to have a nice chunk of it and provide a space, a platform where people can together, and both synchronously together and asynchronously afterwards, in this three-dimensional space. But is he going to have everything? No way. But I think you can accept that he indeed is trying to stay ahead of this. They can be a little clumsy sometimes, but overall, his investment, I think, is going to pay off.
Anybody else want to chime in before we go to the next segment?
Yeah, I mean, I think interoperability has been the number one thing that Futureverse has been trying to solve. Like I mentioned earlier, we want being in immersive environments to feel like browsing the internet, where you can just take yourself, the data about you, your identity, all those things that Nonny mentioned earlier, with you wherever you go. And that has traditionally been a very hard thing to do, because there are, it's been difficult to generate that kind of immersive content. It requires specialized engineers who know what they're doing. There are constraints around what device you're on, what platform you're using, which engine you're in, what type of content, how many, what's the nature of that content? Is it kind of massively multiplayer? Is it kind of smaller groups? So all of those layers of things lead to a matrix, a mess of interoperability decisions. And so we think two things. One, that idea that kind of played in the clip, that ownership of digital things online is like a key tenet that differentiates what we've had in gaming to what the metaverse can be. I can take not only the information about myself between these things, but I can take the representations. For example, the simplest thing to get your head around is an avatar. That thing can go with me everywhere. Doing that is exceptionally hard, and that's why it doesn't happen anywhere. And so we had to like rethink how to create assets that could be natively interoperable. We invented this thing called the Universal Blueprint Framework. I won't go into lots of detail, but it allows us to create content that can exist everywhere in its best version of itself, that there is a universal state for that content that can be read by a bunch of applications. So if I'm in application A and I put a hat on my thing, it will automatically appear in application B, even though that was built by another developer. And so you get this kind of metaversal state of assets and data that can be interoperable with lots of different applications. And there you have something that is kind of like what the internet is today. And without that kind of interoperability, the whole notion of ownership doesn't really matter. You know, I've used this, and people who've kind of heard me talk before will roll their eyes a bit, but because I use this analogy so often, is if the thing you own isn't interoperable, it's like owning a dog that lives in your neighbor's garage. You can kind of like look inside that garage and give it a pet every now and again. And if they're nice to you, they might let you take it for a walk, but you never truly own it. And I think the metaverse can't exist in a space where someone controls it. To get back to your question about Zuckerberg.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to stall you there. I have to leave.
Sorry.
2 minutes late for another meeting. I think there's for interoperability. Just my last comment for interoperability. We need standards, and I don't see standards coming into the picture anytime soon. But in the absence of standards, what happens is the open sourcing of some of the libraries or some of the stack acts like standards. I'll usually say that in the absence of standards, open source becomes a standard. I've seen these examples in software stacks for the last 30 years. So I think that will happen. And with that said, actually, I have to jump off right now, and I will look forward to listening to your rest of the conversation later in the ether. Thank you
It's
very much.
It's a really
guys.
great point to leave on. I grew up in telecommunications and have been through like standards wars across the early days of the internet and then mobile communications. And so these things do take time to play out. There are actually standards bodies out there. One of our teams is a founding and principal member of the Open Metaverse Standards organization. And so there are a bunch of folks out there that are trying to create the standards, but it is a really key part of enabling that vision is to get to some kind of standardization, just like the internet kind of was built on standardization. There were protocol wars to start off with, and we're seeing a lot of that play out now, but we will get to there.
So one of the things that I've been deeply involved with was trying also to create some of the tools for making WebXR, right? Which is exactly an early form of interoperable content production. And so I have a platform called reach.love, which is in a beta. You can go to try.reach.love, and it lets people use button-based system for making WebXR content. It really is a nice intro onto the XR content creation systems. Obviously, when you get into Unreal or Unity, you're going to have a lot more tools. But for a lot of people, just simply getting up there and having an understanding of their space, I mean, they can, build their own little NFT libraries if they want.
Yeah.
And so, but this is a place where now we'll be moving more into Gaussian Splash. The other part of the thing that I'm very interested in, Aaron, is not just, and Andy, apologies, and it's not just, okay, now we're interoperable. One of the things about that is that if I control who I am in these spaces, it gives other people a little bit more trust in what they're experiencing. So we've been working on how to use some AI to help create blockchain systems that automatically put metadata into content that's captured journalistically. been working with a wonderful guy named Mike Corona, who's been really on the front end of some of this stuff. And as general manager of Reuters Visuals, he created a system that even would tell people what was the serial number of the camera that shot the footage. And that can build trust in a system that is so broken. So that's deeply part of my interest in how do we restore trust while we're building this new metaverse. And there is an old dear friend of mine, Philip Rosedale. Hi, Philip.
Hi.
Hey, Phil.
Hi. Sorry I'm late.
No, good to have you here. Yeah, no, I totally, and the kind of comment you made around the Gaussian, I think that's the next kind of technology that will enable, the layer of interoperability that we kind of desperately want to see. I think, moving from engine-centric rendering into something that we're kind of calling internally more like a live diffusion, where it's projected, will actually solve a lot of those interoperability problems down the track. We have 20 or so PhDs that are working in that generative 3D domain, and that is one particular area that's early on, but it kind of like you can see where it's going, that eventually the combination of this data state layer with projective generative AI will solve interoperability.
Well, I'm excited to have Philip popping in. Let's go to segment 2, and then I'll introduce Philip, and then we'll continue the conversation.
The metaverse presents varied investment opportunities, including NFTs, virtual real estate, and digital currencies tied to specific platforms. NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, represent ownership of digital art, collectibles, and gaming assets. In gaming, NFTs let users buy, sell, and trade unique items like avatars and skins, adding value through verifiable ownership and scarcity via blockchain. Virtual real estate is another avenue, with platforms like Decentraland and The Sandbox enabling users to purchase and develop digital land using cryptocurrencies. Investors can create virtual businesses, lease spaces, or host events. However, prices can be volatile, influenced by demand and platform popularity. Digital currencies such as mana and sand serve as native tokens within these platforms, rising in value with user growth. While they offer exposure to the metaverse's economic growth, they carry risks, including market volatility and regulatory uncertainties. Thorough research and diversification are essential for effectively navigating these evolving virtual investment opportunities.
So if you're just joining us, welcome back to Inspired Money, a live stream podcast. In a live stream podcast, anything can happen. You have a guest who isn't able to come. You have a guest who had to leave early, and then you have Philip who just popped in. I didn't know that you were going to be able to make it, Philip. But let me just say that Philip Rosedale is a visionary entrepreneur and the founder of Second Life, the groundbreaking virtual world that the virtual world that pioneered user-generated content in immersive digital communities. With a deep passion for the intersection of technology and human connection, Rosedale continues to explore innovative ways to create meaningful online experiences. Philip, you've been able to build a very successful community in the metaverse, and you're a business person, you're an entrepreneur. How do you think about monetizing? And for someone like me, how do I view this landscape ahead of me for investment opportunities?
Well, there's obviously, thanks for having me. Sorry I was late. Just wasn't able to get the message until halfway into this show. Good.
Better late than never.
Good to be here. And hi, Nonny. Wonderful to see you. That's great. Monetization, there's a lot of stuff to be said. We could obviously take different pieces of it. One observation I would make at the outset is Second Life as a virtual world monetizes very well. Its revenue per user is very high. We don't do any advertising, so it's a subscription and fees-based service. And I think that's something that's really notable and important for everybody to be considering as we move forward beyond social media into virtual worlds and other systems. There's no need to monetize these systems through advertisements. And indeed, I think I'm not alone in this. I'm one of the many people who believes that advertisements, particularly on social media, combined with surveillance, have been very, very toxic and poisonous for the whole world. So we need to get off of doing it.
I just have to note that my career really started because of Second Life, so I'm always grateful for the work that Philip has done, the groundwork that Philip has laid for all of us.
Amen to that.
And your work has been world-changing as well, Nonny.
Thank you.
So, Nonny, can you talk about, like, from your perspective, you're telling stories in a more impactful way because of technology. But then do you view things like NFTs and, real estate in the metaverse? What are your thoughts on these things?
So, I think that like any digital good, which I know that Philip would have a very deep understanding of this, can have value. Any games that you buy digital good for, it can have value. But I think sometimes there was a little bit of confusion around how a digital good can enhance an experience versus a digital good as a trading card, right? And I think that there's a lot of interest initially of like, oh, wow, we've got trading cards like baseball cards. Well, I'm like, how many people in the world actually do baseball trading cards, right? I mean, yes, people have coin collections, whatever. But people who are getting experiences through the digital good or digital item, I think is something which creates a lot more value for folks. And you're going to have a larger audience participation and people interested. I think, we've established a pretty long time ago the experience economy was going to be the future of the way that money would roll. So that is my take. Like, an NFT might be great if it's, an enhancement to your experience. But, I don't think, the Bored Ape Yacht Club is all that of interest anymore, because that was sort of like a trading card that got built up like the tulip scandal in Amsterdam, versus what people do in Second Life is they provide you ways to enhance your experience. So that's kind of one of my big takes on the kind of value that you should be looking for if you want to invest in something that's going to hold for long term.
Yeah, so it's nuanced. Your thoughts, Aaron?
I think so I'll say a few things. NFTs are like PDFs. It's just a data standard. And it allows for interoperability of tokens is primarily what it does, of a certain kind of token, a non-fungible token. Non-fungible token is a thing that is unique in its own right, and so that's what NFTs are. It's a data container you can put stuff in that is non-fungible. What they were supposed to enable was ownership of those digitally unique things. Now, whether those are valuable things intrinsically, whether they're valuable monetarily, whether they're valuable emotionally or personally, those are like different kinds of value that can be prescribed to them. But the concept was you could own something unique online. And Bitcoin solved this double spend problem. It was kind of one of the most fascinating innovations of our generation. The internet went from being a place where digital things were not scarce or ownable because you could simply copy and replicate them, to a system which, through technology and social consensus, could create genuine ownership of digital things online. That then got kind of ported to the content domain with NFTs. And so the idea was people spend time, money, emotions on these virtual experiences, virtual things, why shouldn't they own them? Because they have value. And like I said, whether it's monetary value or emotional value or whatever. And so that was the promise. What actually happened was we got interoperable tokens, but we didn't get interoperable content that lived on top of those tokens. And therefore, the value of that ownership became somewhat less meaningful. As a piece of art, potentially, that's something that that lives in the digital space. That was kind of the trading game that Nonny was talking about earlier. And who's to say what art is worth or not worth? That's something that's kind of outside of my expertise to comment on. But certainly providing a mechanism for content to become more digital and more liquid in a trading environment occurred through that phase. I think what the next phase is touching what Nonny said, is how do you use that technology to make it a more meaningful experience and a more valuable experience for users? And that's where the technology can evolve to providing that layer of interoperability and ownership that means that the content I have is more valuable to me because I can take it with me. And if I want to, at some point, I can exchange it with someone else and they know they can take it with them. And that's really where our focus has been, is how do you create true ownership of content so that the value that comes with true ownership is real. And NFTs are a really basic building block of that. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has to go on top of that to make it true. And we were talking about earlier, this universal blueprint framework. One of the things it tried to do was capture all of the value of a 3D asset inside the NFT itself, as opposed to being a receipt to where that value might live in someone else's garage.
Philip, have you ever owned virtual real estate?
No, not in a speculative sense, but yes, you're right. Second Life has a ton of virtual real estate and $650 or $700 million a year in transactions going on, of which, a big part of those are for real estate. I think a distinction to be made with respect to NFTs and Second Life that is interesting and a little harder to see when you look more broadly at crypto is this distinction between gambling on things for speculative gains, which is, broadly what's happened with Bitcoin and Ethereum, as well as meme coins and in some cases NFTs, and then taking advantage
and
of
the whole stock market.
Yeah, right.
I mean, all investing is speculative. Like
right.
If we didn't speculate, then it wouldn't be investing; it would just be buying.
Right. So we could use the broader expression investing to refer to that portion of purchase activity which is done with the intention that the thing you're buying is going to increase in value over time. Second Life, interestingly, is almost 100% comprised of transactions. As I said, it's like $700 million a year in transactions, which have no expectation of speculative gain. So it's an interesting distinction to make. I think a lot of the debate and discussion around crypto has been confused by the fact that to date, the only reason, I'm being overly a bit hyperbolic there, but the 99% reason why people make transactions in crypto is for the hope of speculative gain, whether on currency or on NFTs.
Well, I think going back to what Nonny was saying about adding value, what's interesting about looking at Second Life is that there's a whole industry taking place, not only in the metaverse, but in our world, right? There are people who are able to create things of value, and it's creating jobs.
Yeah, it's all part of the IP economy, in my view. It's like kind of, where the technology that they're tied to and the economy that exists around them are kind of can be nuanced and varied. But essentially, the trend is that more and more of the things that we value are digital things. And that trend is not going away. It's going to kind of keep accelerating as more and more of the time we spend is in digital experiences and spaces and applications. And so providing a mechanism for people to genuinely own that value is, I think, a really important thing as it becomes a substantial part of the economy and of people's lives, part of their social structures. All of those things tend towards wanting to give the power back to humans. And when you talk about earlier around the case for advertising and social media, being destructive to society. I think that the idea of ownership of our digital selves in a more immersive space is an equally important topic, because if some other corporation owns my digital identity and the things I value, whether monetarily value or emotionally value, that's not a good outcome if we believe that the world is going to be a more immersive virtual space. And that is where I think this technology has really important and interesting properties, is to deliver on that notion of ownership of those things, whether they're monetarily valued or they're intrinsically or emotionally valued to end users. And I kind of always say, like, if the future of the metaverse is an open metaverse, then and you can deliver that in a meaningful experience to consumers, why would they choose anything else? Like, if the alternate is closed, why would you choose that versus open?
Thank you for that. Let's go to segment 3.
Understanding the metaverse's legal landscape involves addressing intellectual property rights, fraud prevention, and data privacy. IP concerns, such as trademarks and NFTs, are complex due to blurred jurisdictional boundaries and easy digital replication. Cases like Hermes versus Rothschild, where Hermes sued over digital replicas of its Birkin bags, highlight the need for clear IP guidelines. The EU's updated design package strengthens protections for digital assets, allowing creators to safeguard their virtual goods. Fraud prevention is vital, with virtual environments increasing risks like counterfeit assets and phishing. Platforms are implementing verification systems, though standards vary. Regulators are urging stricter protocols to protect consumers. Data privacy is also a priority. Laws like GDPR apply to metaverse platforms, requiring secure data handling across interconnected services. As legal frameworks evolve, investors should stay informed on IP, fraud, and privacy standards to manage risks and ensure ethical engagement in virtual economies.
Yeah, I want to go to Philip, because I'm curious. How did Second Life approach intellectual property rights for user-generated content?
Well, in a manner fairly similar to NFTs, we created something called copy mod transfer, CMT, that many people still refer to all the time in Second Life. And that is the set of permissions that you can attach to a digital thing in Second Life, like an article of clothing. And the various checkboxes and stuff in that metadata certify to what extent that item can be, for example, transferred to somebody else, modified once transferred, copied to make extra copies of it. So we actually did a kind of a superset of a lot of the stuff that you see in NFTs way back in 2003. We believed that making it clear that the world and all its contents was created by and controlled by the participants that were coming in was, we thought, vital to the success of Second Life from the beginning. So yeah, it's critical to explain that things are owned by the people who make them in these worlds, and make that absolutely certain. That said, I think that blockchain-based virtual worlds have demonstrated that that is not sufficient to gain mass adoption. That is to say, consumers wanting full control over, their assets or the sovereignty of their identity. These things are not sufficient to drive broad adoption, which I think is one of the mistakes of a lot of metaverse projects, is to assume that just giving those rights to people will suddenly cause millions of people to show up.
I think the problem is they actually didn't give the rights to people. There was nothing in the way that those things were constructed that were different to the way that you've described them in Second Life, and also in some senses possibly worse than the way they're constructed in Second Life. And so the hype didn't match the promise, and that's been one of the kind of big things we've been trying to solve for with this universal blueprint framework, is how can you actually make those rights meaningful inside of that type of technology, which is essentially community cloud computing. How can you make the copy mod transfer actually true inside of that? And that permissioning layer wasn't part of the NFT standard, and so So that's something that we've definitely been working to solve. I think the other thing when it comes to this domain that's probably reflective of the conversation we had earlier is generative AI. I think that's actually a much bigger topic when it comes to this idea of copyright infringement and what to do there. And the approach we've taken in Futureverse with our novel generative models is to go down the path of working with copyright owners so that anything that we create is generated and is trained only on licensed copyright material, specifically licensed for generative AI training by the copyright owners, and so that the outputs of those models can be copyright free too, and the users that are producing that generated content can know that the technology they used to produce it was clean. We went through this process with Gen, which is our generative AI for music generation and sound and voice, of getting it fairly trained certified by this new fairly AI training certification organization, not for profit, to help ensure that the end users actually do own the things that they're producing as well. And that's going to be, I think, a really big emerging topic. Lots of lawsuits flying around at the moment about this that have got to be kind of go through their processes. But from a moral perspective, wherever the legal line ends, I think it's important to support creators. And part of supporting creators is make sure you train these models on licensed copyright.
I think there's three things that, to address in that space, which is, even when you get to that ability to understand where that training came from, how do you then reward the creator? And so there's, I always thought the Interledger folks that were trying to do fractional payments, that they might have been a little early in their days, came out of Mozilla with funding them, et cetera. And I wonder if this might apply to how we're going to, recognize bits of the copyright and, divide up the money that way. The other thing that is, of course, when you go into the physical world and you capture something, you're not really using generative AI, but you are using AI to process that capture. And, people are putting up captures and selling them of physical world art. And the third thing that I think is super interesting is really early on in Second Life was this Yale professor, gosh, I probably recorded it actually, Philip. And they were looking at what are the legal rights of your avatar and your human rights of your human rights of your avatar. So that's a whole other separate, really interesting question of what kind of legal framework for, early on, if you've ever read A Rape in Cyberspace, some very early things of what kind of stuff can happen in these spaces. And how do we have the rights of our avatar not to be utilized in certain ways? So anyway, those are three. Just
or our agent, right? That's another one coming. What are the agentic rights? And I was asked a question the other day, like, how does something like KYC AML apply to an agent that's acting on your behalf? There's like all these very interesting regulatory questions starting to emerge around that stuff as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I never thought about my avatar needing rights, and then how does that differ from me as an individual?
Or your digital twin.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, the other extension on that is the blockchain work that's gone on actually doesn't yet address the issue that Nonny raised there, which is that the jurisdictional legal treatment of conflict in virtual worlds is as yet unresolved. Like I always say, if somebody from, say, Germany and France or something in Second Life gets into a legal dispute over copyright, where the copyright laws in both countries are different, what do we do? So I think there is a process yet that will only be driven by larger scale adoption, that will be to recognize that we need a single legal standard for interactions between people. And blockchain doesn't solve that problem. It almost muddies it a bit more by saying, hey, we'll just do it where there's no laws. And that's not going to work either.
I think,
people
Yeah.
broadly adopt and build laws to address things that they as a community or a collective need to manage. And the same thing is going to happen online, but it actually hasn't happened yet.
I don't think blockchain was
Interesting.
ever going to solve that, but because of the problems you talked about, which is where the law actually intersects with this stuff. And in some jurisdictions, it is actually being used to, and has been codified in law. And interestingly, inside of China, a lot of IP protection measures are based on immutable timestamps that are provided from distributed ledgers. And so that's one, I think it provides an interesting piece of evidence that is recognized in some jurisdictions formally, but can be informally recognized in other jurisdictions about the creation timeline of a piece of IP. And so while it might not be entirely resolving of the legal disputes, it definitely does provide additional data to the claimants. So when we generate a song in Gen, part of that process of generating it is creating, for every prompt, we create a hash of the content that was outputted, the account that was used to create it, the fact that it was verified to not be copyright infringing on over 150 million songs we screen it against. And so that doesn't solve a copyright issue, but it does provide a data point to someone who might get into a copyright dispute on a tamper-proof database.
It makes my head spin, but the legal eagle should be very excited. It's ripe for a lot of legal work and legal precedents to try to figure it out and see how it plays out. Let's move on to the, oh, yeah, go ahead.
No, yes, sadly, I think we have to conclude for me here. And I think, Philip, you were saying the same, and Aaron. Andy, will you bring us back for another part 3 of this?
Yeah, it was a great chat.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be in this company and be trying to wrestle with some of these ideas. And I have so many of my own questions. It's unfortunate that I have other circumstances that are drawing me away.
I would love to bring you all back, because each of you as a panelist here makes my day. So you've made my day many times over. I appreciate it. If you guys want to wrap it up, then we can do that and try to continue some other time.
Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah, no, I unfortunately have to jump too, but
too.
at any time to come and have this type of discussion with two absolute legends in the industry, I would.
This is real. This is a real meat. Real meat.
Yeah.
We're going through some real meat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now. Bye now.
Thank you to all the panelists, to Aaron, to Nonny, to Philip. I hate to wrap up early, but I think it makes sense to do so when we have so many dropping off. Philip was like a surprise that blew my mind. So very excited to have him. Let me just say that, from the limited number of segments that we did, what's my takeaway? The takeaway is that the metaverse is not just a future vision. It's present, it's here, and it's really blending immersive technology, AI, and human creativity to redefine how we can interact, how we can work, and how we can connect in digital spaces. And it was impactful upon me when Aaron noted that we're going to spend like more than half our lives in front of a screen. So whether or not we like that or not, one thing's clear, that the metaverse is opening doors for innovation, collaboration, and cultural transformation. Let me just urge everyone to visit all of our panelists. You can find Nonny de la Peña at emblematicgroup.com. Sarbjeet Johal, who had to jump off early, he's at sjol.com. That's SJOHAL.com. Aaron McDonald, find him at Futureverse.com. And Philip Rosedale. Philip, what is your favorite? Oh, he's dropped off too. So find him at secondlife.com. I think that's the address. We're going to reconvene at a future date to continue the conversation on the metaverse. Thank you again for joining us and spending your time with us, whether you're watching live or listening to the replay. The next Inspired Money episode is going to be classic cars as retirement investments. We're going to try to get that show in this Wednesday, November 27th at 1 p.m. We're going to see if we can round up a panel in time. I'm not sure if that's going to come together because of the Thanksgiving holiday. We're going to have to see. Whether it happens or not, I want to wish you, if you're in the United States, a very happy Thanksgiving, and look forward to having you join us soon. Until next time, do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens. Thanks, everyone.